Well, good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, October the 14th, 2014. It is a blustery 64 degrees here in Indianapolis. Storm clouds overhead. Looking out my office window, it looks like our cold front has finally gone through. We had some rough weather last night, luckily after dark, which diminished our chances of tornadic weather. Unfortunately, we did lose some people out there. So today, please, eyes to the skies, pay attention. Anybody from, let's say, Tennessee into Alabama, into Georgia, Florida, those areas, please pay attention, stay safe. We got some more rough weather expected today. It's not fun. One thing I will never get used to is tornadoes living here in Indianapolis now. So don't want to lose anybody. And we have plenty of warnings now to get into shelter if we need to. So, what's going on today? I will admit I'm slightly nervous this morning. We're going to jump in here because I have a lot that I want to talk about with my guest this morning. I consider him like the Mac Daddy of the post-apocalyptic genre. Been a great, huge fan of his for a very long time. One of the first post-apocalyptic books I've ever read, and talking to a lot of people out there and my friends, the book 1 Second After is one of the reasons that they got into preparedness to begin with. So I'm not going to ramble on here because I know you're all here to listen to the man himself. So, Dr. William Fortune, welcome this morning to the show.
Good morning. I have to start with you have dragged me into the 21st century. This is the first time I've used Skype for something like this, and it's cool. I'm having a good time with it. I think.
And you sound awesome, which is cool too. So
well, that weather is now hitting, I should add, Western North Carolina, and I went to Purdue, so I can remember those warnings where everybody is going to the basement. But being a kid from Jersey, I'd always go outside to watch the show. Weird side of me, I guess.
If I've thought about that. If I didn't have kids and didn't have to be that responsible, I would be a storm chaser. I really would. I'm fascinated by weather. But the whole, oh my goodness, even now my oldest is 26 years old. Yeah, I just said that.
Yeah, it changes your perspective.
And the youngest is 14, and it's like, we're going to pass by this tornado and we're just going to stay safe over here. But hey, good morning.
Morning. Ready to go. Where do we start?
Well, first, let me say, greatly appreciate you taking your time out because I know you're a busy person. And I'm even more looking forward to tonight because it's a lot more fast paced, getting into your mind and, throwing scenarios out there and see what you come up with kind of thing. But I greatly, greatly appreciate you doing this for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And again, thank you for bringing me into the 21st century.
Well, I'm honored. But so a lot of us have read 1 Second After. I mean, it's a phenomenal book. It's brought a lot of people into, hey, you need to wake up and maybe look at the fact that you need to have, some stockpiles, some water, some food, medicine, that kind of stuff. So, you don't have to eat your dog or anything like that. But I just finished a few weeks ago, Day of Wrath. How did that come about? I know you put a blurb on there that you really didn't want to write the book, but why did you feel compelled to write the book, and where did it come from?
So you want me to start with Day of Wrath?
Yeah.
Okay. I started working on the sequel to 1 Second After back in the spring. I wrapped it up in the middle of June. It'll be published next year. I didn't want to write a sequel to 1 Second After because it was such a darn grueling book. But as they say in The Godfather, the publisher finally made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I just finished the sequel to 1 Second After. I just got engaged. My fiance and I, on June 28th, I can peg the date exactly, we were talking about the incredible, frightful offensive of ISIS into northern Iraq. And at the same time, there were all the news reports coming up about the collapse of security on the southern border. Long day's conversation back and forth, and she just looked at me at one point and said, Bill, you got to write a book about this. And believe me, I did not want to do it. I believe in the foreword to that book, my first line is, I didn't want to write this book.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to a summer off, but that evening I sat down, and being the historian, I got my PhD from Purdue, and I was trained by an incredible military historian there, Gunther Rothenberg. I started really digging into the research, looking past what American media was showing, actually going to, shall we say, the primary sources of what ISIS itself was putting out. And it scared the crap out of me, because some folks listening might recall that in 2004, an Islamic terrorist group struck a school in Russia. They murdered over 300 children, parents, and teachers, grabbing hold of this school and laying siege to it, and then holding it for 3 days. Thus started the writing of the book Day of Wrath. It took 6 weeks. It's a short book. It's only 46,000 words. It's a novella. My intent then was not to go standard publishing, because that would have taken a year. I had a very bad feeling about what's coming at us this fall. It seems like, would you agree with me? It feels like there's a perfect storm, shall we say, of disasters headed our way.
That's the exact word I was thinking of yesterday. And I tell you what, after I read Day of Wrath, I was never so glad I homeschooled in my life. That fear that you have came through your book with such impact. I got done, and it took me about 2 days to read it. It's a very easy read to a degree, but it's very emotional. And I looked at my husband, and I must have been pale and everything else. I said, you have to read this. And since then, we have driven around and looked at security issues that are out there. And I think people, in the preparedness world, I think one of the best tools that we have are authors' minds. Just like in when you study martial arts, they always tell you, let your mind go there and think about different scenarios that could happen, and then find a path out of it, work your way back out of it, and you stand a better chance of surviving than if you don't let your mind go there. And some of these scenarios are rough. Your book is rough, but I honestly, heart of hearts, think more people need to understand the seriousness of what is coming down the pipeline. And your book is a very eye-opening aspect of that.
The book Day of Wrath, just like 1 Second After, is actually a work of fiction. But hey, I'm a historian. Everything I put into the book Day of Wrath, in a way, is based on fact. How ISIS could walk into several elementary and middle schools, teams of just 3 to 5 trained killers, excuse me, and within a matter of minutes could annihilate most of the people in the school. A sign on a school door, this is a gun-free zone, is not going to turn aside terrorists.
No.
The incidents I wrote in the book about just simply driving along interstate highways and slaughtering people as parents panic and are trying to get to their children's schools, I took that straight from actual video ISIS shot of driving down highways in Iraq, highways which I believe we're the ones who built, and then just laughing as they randomly shoot up cars. And the amazing thing on those videos is these guys are masters of social media. They were wearing GoPro cameras, like the type that skydivers and pilots use.
Yeah.
They're filming it, and they're laughing, and they even layer in a soundtrack singing praise to Allah. So as I'm writing this stuff, I'm a nighttime writer. I usually start around 9 or 10 in the evening, work to 3 or 4 in the morning. My poor fiance was getting phone calls at 2 in the morning. And I'll confess, there were times I was in tears. I was like, I do not want to work on this blanking book. It's pushing me over the edge with what I'm seeing. And thank goodness she was there to encourage me along and just said, you got to keep at it. I wrapped the book up early in August. And while I'm writing it, there was a terrible sense of urgency because I'm watching what ISIS is doing. And the key thing is, recall in August, they were openly saying, we're going to bring it to America. Some of your listeners might recall, remember the videos that they started putting out of pictures of the White House?
Yes.
It's one of the building in flames and the ISIS banner, and like a movie promo saying, coming to America. This is not like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is like our grandfather's terrorism. ISIS is the terrorism now using modern social media. And in fact, using the very system you and I are talking on at this very moment. We're talking on Skype. They know how to use this sort of stuff to terrorize, to recruit, to intimidate, to get their message out.
Yeah,
and
they do.
very effectively. They're going to bring it here.
And they have a different, I mean, they're already living in a whole nother mindset than we are. And how long do you think it's going to take the people here to get switched over to that mindset?
One of the things I hope for with Day of Wrath, and I tend to follow what's happening on Amazon, which is a main distributor, the same way some people watch the stock market. That's the Vox Populi. I get a book out there, and what's being said on Amazon can tell me whether it hit, whether it didn't. And so many folks are writing, this is like reading the real thing. This is like reading a future headline. I believe it's going to happen. They're going to move in here, and to show how rapidly the news is unfolding, as I wrote the book, I'm thinking gunmen, terrorists infiltrating across the southern border in cooperation with the drug cartels. I just read an article a couple of days ago where somebody pointed out, all they had to do was take several of their jihadists, inject them with Ebola, get them into the United States, and let them wander around Grand Central Station, Penn Station, LAX.
They were just over there for Hajj.
Yes.
They were all just all together. But there was in the news here just recently a school, I believe, in the southeastern part of the United States that did get threatening letters about beheadings from supposedly ISIS. Now, we have to be sensitive to the fact that there could be copycats out there. But, and authors do a lot of research. I'll give you that. I mean, it is nonstop. You dive into all kinds of a plethora of rabbit trails, let's say. So you honestly believe that ISIS already is here to a degree,
yes,
and they will be attacking our schools?
Yes. Al-Qaeda, in the military term, is asymmetrical warfare, is to approach warfare in a manner different than what your opponent is expecting. Al-Qaeda went for what we could call hard targets and commercial targets, going for the World Trade Center, commercial target, the Pentagon, blowing up the train in Spain. Al-Qaeda was, again, an older system of terrorism. ISIS knows us. We've seen the reports of hundreds of terrorists joining them, coming out of Europe and America. They even put up on social media systems how to infiltrate in to join us so you can join in the killing, and then we'll send you back. The soft targets of America, number one, are schools. You yourself we were a couple minutes ago, we were talking about how having kids changes the way we look at the world.
Yes.
Now, when I wrote 1 Second After, my daughter was 12 years old when I started on that book. She had just her mere presence heavily influenced how I wrote 1 Second After. Now, I'm a professor. I teach at a small college. What is the softest target out there? Our schools. Not just physically, but emotionally. What's known as the Beslan massacre. Folks can look it up on Wikipedia. Just type in Beslan, B-E-S-L-A-N, massacre. Imagine that happening in an American school or schools. It would trigger a national panic, and it would achieve what ISIS wants, and that is to demonstrate to the world that they can bring us to our knees at any time.
What would you suggest? I had a conversation with a mother a couple weeks ago. We were discussing this in one of my private groups. And, the point was brought up, it would never happen here, and our schools are protected. They've got the doors locked. Now we have, a double set of doors. And I'm like, guys coming out of cars with, AKs, ARs, whatever. That glass isn't going to stand up to anything. If they're going to, and we're describing in your book, just a 3-man team that can pretty much completely take over a school.
Okay, a really good example on this. Facebook. A friend of mine posts up, I would have to say, a very Pollyannish solution to. She was well motivated. It was how a teacher, I believe the teacher is from Indiana or maybe Ohio, had developed a type of drop lock. It's a steel bar that.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All right, I watched one of the promos for that, and the person is extolling the virtues of it, and she's standing next to a window. So, terrorists coming up, oh, well, first of all, there's a no gun zone sign. We got to think twice. Oh, we can't shoot our way through the door. And they walk away when there's a window. Think about how all of our elementary and middle schools are designed. There's single-story and two-story buildings for a reason. Actually, that goes back to an incident in 1959 where a multi-story school in Chicago burned and almost 100 children lost their lives. So in the 60s and 70s, when we were building all these buildings, they were single-story or two-story with a lot of glass because we were not thinking about terrorism then. Now, we can't change that at this moment, but we better be cognizant of the fact that a professional killer team can walk right into our schools, regardless of locks, regardless of signs, or old Charlie, the nice security officer who's there who might be armed with a taser. He'll be gone within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
We have to rethink now at a local level, how are we going to handle a potential terrorist hit on our schools and not wait for the feds to be the ones to figure it out for us.
And I think that's what we get caught up in a lot here is somebody else take care of it. Our government will take care of it.
Yeah.
And we don't take the personal responsibility.
You got it exactly. I know within our prepper community, most of us are very strong constitutionalists. Yes, the feds have a job in relationship to ISIS. And my top priorities would be, one, secure the southern border now because that is the infiltration route. These guys are not going to come flying in on Delta Airlines. Two, we do need stronger security within the United States. And three, this is a hard one, political correctness is going to kill us all.
Oh, yeah, agree with that. But let me ask you this. On the flip side, if we go too far, how much of our freedom is taken away because of it? Or is this a setup to get to that point?
Do we want to give away the end of the book?
No, that I don't want to, because I really want everybody to support you.
There's been three reactions on the end of the book. Either I'm crazy, or I never thought of it, or oh my God, this could very well be real. We have to. Our best response points for protecting our schools at the moment is local. That our police, our local communities are a heck of a lot more cognizant that our school could be hit and reevaluate how teachers are trained and how security is provided for schools. And what I call situational awareness. The heck with political correctness. We see some Middle Eastern types who just don't quite seem to be right. Make the phone call now. React now. Better to be embarrassed than to be sorry.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to see a little bit of a change. But if you had kids in the public school system, what kind of conversation? And I don't want our conversation to
exactly what
panic. I want people to think. I don't want the panic. I want people to think. Let's get ahead of this and see what we can do. So if you had kids in the public school system right now, what kind of conversations would you start having? What would you do?
All right. I won't start with my daughter, but I'm going to mention that in a minute. Recall Virginia Tech. That's been, 5-6 years ago now?
Yeah.
All right. Do you recall the professor who had survived the Holocaust?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For some folks who might not recall this story, there was a professor at Virginia Tech who had survived the Holocaust. Every semester, he openly lectured his students on day one. He said, look, I survived the Holocaust. I believe part of the reason it went down as bad as it did was because we laid down like sheep and waited to be taken away. Whereas if we had fought back, maybe we could have delayed it. So on the day his school was hit, his students already knew what to do, and that was some of the boys to help barricade the door and then if need be, smash the windows and get his kids out. Recall he had about 25 students in his room, and sexist or not, it was, young man, you help the ladies get out the window. And I would think one of them broke their leg getting down. Get out of the room. That professor held the door. He died doing it, but he saved 25 lives. I noticed how the media did it for a day or two, covered him, and then buried it. Oh, he really didn't follow procedure. They really should have just laid down on the floor and waited. If they had, there would have been 25 more dead.
Yeah.
Now, to my own daughter, I broke rules with my own daughter. My daughter was a student at a wonderful Christian school in our community. I felt that type of school was more of a target. And I told her, if you hear gunfire, I don't give a hang what others are saying. You get out of the building. Do not listen. Do not go where everybody else is going. Go in the opposite direction. If it means jumping out a window and breaking your leg, do it. But go in the opposite direction. Get out. We have to rethink how we're going to handle a situation. I feel that schools should be looking more at scenarios of getting the kids out of the buildings immediately and scattering them into the woods and parking lot rather than laying in their rooms and waiting. Well, because professional killers are just going to walk in and machine gun everybody in the room.
Yeah, and that's going to be hard here in Indiana. You know, we have nothing but fields around schools. Unfortunately, they're built like that. You know, looking at the high school even here. I mean, put yourself in the scenario of your book and go drive out to your local school and look at how many doors are on the outside of the building and how easy it would be if you had some kind of firearm to just blow that glass out and get into the school. It's it's very scary.
The modus operandi, shall we call it, the training of the terrorists at the moment is predicated undoubtedly on, American schools, they'll lock the door. They'll lay on the floor. All you have to do is just blow the door off, walk in, shoot the room up, walk on to the next room. Instead, with all those exits, as you mentioned, a moving target is a heck of a lot harder to hit than an 8-year-old child curled up like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered on the floor.
Yeah.
When you watch video of ISIS terrorists, I have a hard time talking about it, beheading 2- and 3-year-old children. They are remorseless, evil, satanic killers, and we better face it. Well, and they're going to bring it here.
Let me ask you this, because there's theories out there that where do you think ISIS comes from, being a historian that you are? Because there's theories that, you know, ISIS is just an extension of our government here, that we've trained them, that we've caused it, and we're bringing it upon ourselves.
I would strongly disagree with that. An analogy on that is Abraham Lincoln once commented how that type of thinking is like the highwayman coming up to you, puts a gun to your head, and says, "Give me all your money, and if you do not, I'll be forced to shoot you, and then you will be your own murderer." Whatever might have been going down behind the scenes in the civil war in Syria a year or two ago, ISIS is an organization that has risen up in the hotbed breeding area of terrorism for 1,000 years. Okay, you're stuck with a historian. If we go back 1,000 years, there was a group located there called the Assassins, hashish eaters, which in our lexicon today is assassin. Their stronghold was what we now call Eastern Syria, Northern Iraq, Western Iran, Southeastern Turkey. They dominated the region for 300 years using many of the same methods that ISIS uses today. Granted, they were pre-technology, but still, they terrorized the region for 300 years. Terrorism is a way of fighting a war that we as Americans have a hard time understanding or dealing with. We think far more in conventional terms. It was part of our failing in Iraq of approaching it more as a conventional war than as an asymmetrical war. And yeah, we did screw up. We screwed up big time. We did not understand the history of the region even as we went into it.
We are watching ISIS on the nightly news go into Syria. Turkey is very unstable right now with that. We're seeing, ISIS right outside of Baghdad, and if Baghdad falls, that's going to be a whole nother issue. But Max from our Facebook page wants to know: do you think that ISIS will come after Europe first, or do you think the U.S. will get hit first?
Matt, that's a really hard one to answer. They'll go for their targets of opportunity. ISIS is claiming, and open source, unclassified information is stating that thousands of Europeans have done it. Now, who are these Europeans? The vast majority of them are Muslims who have immigrated into particularly France, England, and elsewhere in the last 20 to 30 years. A new generation has gone up, and now is the call for jihad, and they're going back. But they have been also westernized. That's the terrifying aspect of them as a weapon. They understand the culture, how to integrate in, how to blend, but at the same time, once infiltrated in, how to kill. Last time I was in London, a couple of years back, I recall talking to a friend there who said there's whole neighborhoods in London now that it's Sharia law.
Yeah.
And our bobbies will not go in there because they won't come out. That's a hell of a statement, isn't it?
Well,
England, the origin of, as well, our own systems of freedom and government, and now sinking back into a medieval system of law. The question I'm going to toss back, where is Western feminism in response to Sharia law? That's an open question to you. What do you think? Where the heck is Western feminism responding to Sharia law?
We've asked that, and not just with feminism itself, but why aren't the moderates standing up? If they're preaching that, Muslim, we say all the time, it's Muslim is not a religion of peace, and they're coming back and saying, well, yes it is, those are just extremists. Then why the hell aren't the moderates standing up and saying, hey, we don't condone it? Just like with Westboro, we saw the flip side of it, where the Christians that weren't associated with Westboro stood up and said, no, this is not something that we stand for. This is not what we're about. Where are the Muslims in all of this? Why aren't they standing up?
Let me mention Westboro first, because they came to my community 2 years ago to harass a religious leader here, and a very good man, actually to harass Billy Graham and to harass my college. And a number of Christians, myself included, came out to witness against them. Let me add just one quick thing about Westboro and their method of operation. Several friends of mine, we were going to disrupt it. And the chief of police took us to one side and he said, for heaven's sake, don't, because they are setting you up. This is not about some supposed Christian group. These guys are a suing machine. They'll have a vehicle there with cameras on, and the moment you violate their rights, they will slap a lawsuit on the community and on you. That's how they fund themselves. I had to stand there, and I'll admit, I was in tears as they abused an American flag, with the chief of police blocking me because he knew how I was going to react. He said, Bill, don't do it. Turn your back. Don't do it. But wherever Westboro went, recall, thousands of people turned out. We sure as hell are not seeing that with so-called moderates. If you go on, we could do a whole show just on what is the Quran and what are the hadiths, the teachings about the Quran.
Yeah.
And the key point is that it is perfectly permissible. It's accepted practice to lie to the infidel until you gain dominance. Once you gain dominance, they either convert or they die. Imagine if on this, whether folks listening are Christian or not, Jewish, whatever, but imagine if on the Sermon on the Mount, Christ had said, okay, blessed be this, blessed be that. By the way, go out, infiltrate in with the Gentiles. Once you gain dominance over them, either they're going to be circumcised and convert, or they're all going to die. No. His whole life example was to speak the truth and to show compassion. We do not see that in the Quran, which becomes increasingly strident against Jews, Christians, and anyone who they said did not believe in their cause. So where are the moderates? I'm still waiting.
Yeah, sadly enough. One of the things that, we talk about is, preparedness and flipping the light switch between normalcy bias versus being in the moment. And the faster, we don't want to live in that scenario, that fear that you're constantly looking for ISIS or, the bad guys, and you're always afraid. But they're already living that scenario versus where we're thinking about soccer practice and what we're going to have for dinner that
Hmm.
night, because we got it. I mean, we've got it made here. If you think about it, we don't deal with half of the stuff that people in other countries do on a regular basis. So, you know, I was talking to some good friends of ours the other night. What's it going to take to wake us up here? And unfortunately, I feel that it's going to take, is it going to possibly a scenario like you lay out in your book before people wake up to the fact that this is real, this is here, and I know that let's just say I know that there are people here that mean to do us harm. So, what do you think it's going to take to get people awake here in the United States to the fact that we need to really take this seriously and not panic, but look at how our structure is and start getting things resolved?
All right, again, you're stuck with the historian who's probably going to teach a history class later today. Mid 1930s, the United States Navy does a war game in which they put a couple of carriers north of Hawaii and simulated could they do a successful strike on Pearl Harbor. Answer was yes, but nah, nobody would do it anyhow. In the weeks leading up to Pearl Harbor, there were so many clear warnings it was coming. But right up until the last second, it was like, no, this can't really be happening. And we know the result. We as Americans, usually we have to take a visceral gut blow before we finally wake up to something, as we did on 9/11. But think about it. 9/11 happens, we come together, and then within several years, we're tearing each other's throats out again over what's right, what's wrong, are we doing the right thing? Oh, gee, the poor guys at Gitmo. I think it's going to take us getting our teeth kicked in before we finally wake up. And therefore, the message to our prepper community is, at least preppers are awake. At least they're aware. They're aware of the threats of potential breakdown from an EMP. I dare say the prepper community is very carefully watching what's going on with Ebola and not really believing a lot of what we're being told.
Yeah, that's for
And,
certain.
oh gosh, every single doctor I have talked to is like, do they have their heads stuck up somewhere? Because this is not how I'm seeing an infectious disease. In fact, I had a doctor. It was funny. I went in for, I got to go to a little medical procedure later this week. The doctor walks into the room, and first he says, gee, I read 1 second after. It took me 10 minutes to finally get him to say, can we talk about my stomach? You know? Yes, the book scared the hell out of you, but I'm scared the hell of what you want to do to me sometime later this week. But we were chatting about this only 2 weeks ago, and he said one of his buddies is actually worked in the unit in Atlanta and said they got it all wrong. They're not telling the truth. He said, you want to go down and interview him and write a book about Ebola? And I was like, there's no way in hell I want to write a book about Ebola now. I've had enough for the moment.
Well, they've even changed, the CDC. If you watch the director on TV, he's even changed what he said. And we all know this thing is mutating. I mean, there's so many strands of it, who really can keep up. But they've already changed their story a number of times on, now they're, scratching their heads and placing the blame on how this nurse got Ebola, and she was double gloved and had the suit on, and now they're saying, oh, she must have just taken it off wrong. It's like, are you kidding me?
Give me a break.
Why don't we just say we don't know?
It's a terrible overused statement about just because we're paranoid does not necessarily mean they're not out to get us. The sad thing at this moment for America is we have such a crisis of faith and belief in our leadership. After Benghazi, after Fast and Furious, it would take me 2 minutes to list after. Our response of, yeah, right, is at an all-time low. I can recall in my lifetime a president who, when he stood up and said, whatever, including Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, I believed him. I grew up in a Democrat household in working class New Jersey. Whether he deserved it, Franklin Roosevelt during World War II, we believed in our leadership. We don't believe in our leadership anymore. So as we're facing a crisis.
Why is he even still there?
Because of the Constitution, which we must respect. And because of a lack of guts on the part of some to stand up. I was just talking to my fiance last night, where when the government shutdown hit last year, I felt we were within a week of a serious confrontation that the country needed. When I'm still left awed, furious over the fact that our military memorials and our national cemeteries were shut down deliberately.
Yeah.
And I think the veterans of World War II were on the point of leading America in a stand-up against the government. And then the Rhino leadership, backed off.
So what's it going to take, do you think? I was talking to a college professor that I know here, and we had that discussion. What's it going to take? Because we see the riots going on all over Hong Kong right now. It's just blowing up. What's it going to take for citizens here? Are we too fat and sassy? Or is it going to take something happening to our food supply? Or what's it really going to take? Because we've seen the truckers, the bikers, the veterans, everybody, start, but then it dies down.
Of course, and we're not saying this to cover our butts. We are in no way whatsoever advocating violence, but we are advocating First Amendment rights, of the right to protest and to peacefully gather. But I think within a week from now or 2 weeks, you have to be crazy to go to a peaceful gathering, because as Ebola starts to spread, the mathematics of exponential growth in Africa and then finally expanding out to the rest of the world is obvious. The biggest thing that has me shocked right now is, why in hell have we not closed down air transportation into the United States? And then they're saying, oh, well, we need to keep it open so we can get supplies in. Yes, get supplies in, but let's not have any more commercial flights coming out.
Well, I think we're monitoring five whole airports now. I think they're checking temps.
Second, great. Yes.
My sarcasm
doesn't that make
off now.
Better? Let's just lighten up for a second on a grim topic. These aren't the droids you're looking for. So they're going to walk. Let's say there's a deliberate ISIS desire to get somebody in with Ebola. We call reports that 94% of the traffic goes through these 5 airports. Well, where's the other 6% go? And beyond that, you could not be running temperatures. You step off a plane in 24 hours, you're a walking infection.
Yeah.
I can't comprehend it. I literally cannot comprehend this not shutting down air traffic into plague-ridden countries.
Well, let me ask you this, because we've talked about in the past, while they're focused on the southern border, what's going on our northern border? When the left hand is doing something, what's really going on with the right hand? So do you think Ebola or ISIS is being used to cover up something else?
Very possibly so. And in fact, since Day of Wrath came out, it came out on August 17th in ebook, and it's now out in paperback as well. I've done several interviews in Canada, and the talk show host I've been talking to up there say, hey, Bill, you focused in your book on the southern border. The northern border is just as porous, both ways. Yeah, you have your checkpoints, but you go 5 miles down the road, you just walk across. I used to live in Maine, and you can just walk across the border almost anywhere. There's only 2 or 3 checkpoints. All the rest of it's just walk across the border. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. We lived in a different age when we allowed that. But this is a new age. This is a 21st century age of high-tech, using high-tech capability to create terrorism. And ISIS is gleefully taking advantage of it.
My husband has a question. He just threw at me on a piece of paper.
Hi, your husband's name is
As Ed.
Ed, how you doing?
He loves this story, and he knows that, that you're a historian. And I want to throw this out there so people understand. Yes, you are the author of 1 Second After and the book we're talking about, Day of Wrath, but you also have a plethora of other things that you've done too. So I don't want people to funnel in and think that's just it. You had a radio show at one time. You've had numerous other books, and if you go to your website, you've traveled around the world, and and with your teaching history and things like that. So you're just a walking encyclopedia. But he wants to know, and he's shared this story a number of times about General Blackjack Pershing with Moros. He wants to know if the story is actually true. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, the one where Pershing, during the Philippine insurrection, supposedly took 30 prisoners of Muslim extremists and executed 29 of them and had them wrapped up in pigskins.
Yeah.
Great story, but historically doubtful. I don't trust Snoops because of who backs Snoops, but it seems doubtful, but that was used. Whether we think that politically correct or not, that was used. You've prompted me to tell a little story I'm embarrassed about, but it relates to ISIS. I was on an expedition to Mongolia. We ate marmot while we were there. Marmots are plague carriers. They carry bubonic plague. We observed safety precautions in regards to the hunters and how the marmots were killed. It's part of a folk custom there. My story I'm slightly embarrassed about is we're coming in from the outback after being out there for a month. And just as we're approaching the major city of Ulaanbaatar, there's a roadblock, big white trailer, Red Cross flags. It was a bubonic plague checkpoint. Big signs up in a number of languages. If you've eaten marmot, if you've been anywhere near this, you must tell us. Our driver turned to us and said, keep your mouth shut. Because if you say you ate marmot 2 days ago, you will be stuck here for 7 days. What do you think we did? I'm kind of ashamed to admit it. But I knew we were safe. We got to the checkpoint. The guy said, you been around marmots? And we're like, what's a marmot? Never saw it. We went on through. I know people are going to yell at me and call up and write nasty letters saying
you just contaminated the whole world.
Yeah, but the point is it not obvious? Is it not obvious that that happens?
Oh,
is everybody going to tell? Is everybody going to tell the truth? And by the way, I did wind up in the hospital 3 weeks later. I had hepatitis, which I actually caught in China on an archaeological site there, Hep A. But as I was lying in the emergency room with 105 fever, the moment I told them I had been in Mongolia, things scrambled. I can still remember this. The doctor coming in saying, we're going to draw some blood and you might have plague. And I was like, okay, well, amoxicillin will take care of that. And he said, if I come back in a hazmat suit, and I just said, just don't come in with a card saying, bring out your dead, because that would freak me out. But the point is, the moment I said I had been in Mongolia, the hospital started to react. And that's a small city hospital here in the South. So people will lie.
Oh yeah, well, it's a known fact that this guy, Thomas Duncan, lied when he came over here, and that they were doing when they got on their flight was they would take a couple Advil or Motrin beforehand to reduce the fever.
Right.
Because that's all they were checking.
Yes.
So yeah, completely agree. But the chat room right now is talking about your Trekkie background.
Oh, no, we're not talking about Star Trek, huh?
Yeah. Jane
My fiance and I last night were just watching one of our favorite worst episodes.
Well, we're a Ted geeky, so yes. We get into all that kind of stuff. But I have 2 questions.
Sure.
What do you read?
What do I read? Unfortunately, I rarely read for pleasure. It's almost all of it's tied into research. And when I was working on the sequel to 1 Second After, or when I was working on ISIS, Robin, the fine young lady I'm engaged to, who happened to walk into the house right now. Hey, Robin, I'm on the interview. She was pulling up interpretations of hadiths. I was reading the Quran. I tend to read what I'm researching. And then if I wish to relax for a while, of all things, I'll go back and just read a couple of my favorite old novels, Dune or Lord of the Rings, or some of my favorite history books.
So you're into sci-fi.
Well, that's actually where I started. I wrote about 15 or 20 sci-fi novels before going through graduate school, shifting far more into history and modern subjects.
Awesome. So what keeps you up at night? Oh, wait. Hang on. Because, wait, before we go there, Jane Mom.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. Jane Mom with the Prep, who's in the chat room right now, and we're going to say good morning to everybody in the chat room, wants to know what's your favorite Star Trek episode ever?
My favorite Star Trek episode ever. Well, we were watching the one where Kirk and the woman transfer between each other's bodies, and that triggered a lot of weird commentary between Robin and I for about an hour of like, we would have written this a little bit differently. But seriously, I think one of my favorites is, I believe it was called Balance of Terror, where they first meet the Romulans. And the screenplay was lifted from a very famous World War II movie called The Enemy Below, of a matching of wits between a destroyer commander played by Robert Mitchum and a U-boat commander. And it was very well written. Some of the great godfathers of science fiction, like Silverberg and others, were actually doing writing for the original Star Trek series, which is still my favorite.
Awesome. No, they want to know what you think is the worst one.
Oh, okay. Funny true story. I think about the worst one ever was in Next Generation, where Riker, they wind up on a planet where people are androgynous. And Riker has an affair with one, and is it a male, a female, or both? And
is that the one they keep him on the planet?
And they put him on trial.
Yeah.
For sex crimes. And the reason why it stands as one of my favorite worst ones is, I remember the prosecutor in that one. I was going, wow, she's pretty hot. But oh gosh, what's wrong with me? Is this a guy or what?
Well, there's and I hate to see this, there's a Marine that's being held in the Philippines right now. I think it's in the Philippines, somewhere over there. And because he's accused of murdering.
He wants a sex change operation. Yes.
No, I thought he killed someone that had a sex change operation.
Well, there's a punchline to that episode. Years pass, and we get a new professor comes into my college. Her office is across from mine. I go walking in to say hello the first day, and there is the photo. She, as an actress, had played the prosecutor. And a very nice, attractive woman. And my first comment was, oh, gosh, I don't have a problem with sexual identity. You are a woman. I didn't have the heart to tell her. I thought it was the worst episode they ever made.
That's hilarious. Somebody else wants to know, and I don't remember because it scrolled too fast, but I caught the question. I think it's Kevin. Have you read Alas, Babylon?
Absolutely. And if you look at the foreword to 1 Second After, I specifically state I was inspired by Alas, Babylon to write an updated version. I'll openly say 1 Second After is an Alas, Babylon for the 21st century with an EMP plot rather than a full-scale thermonuclear war. It's one of the 2 or 3 of my favorite science fiction novels. That and Canticle for Leibowitz and Dune.
Oh, you're a Dune fan.
Absolutely.
Awesome. You fit right in with us. You know that? We're just gonna keep you.
No, I'm not wearing Spock ears while we talk.
Oh. Well, then.
Sorry. I have more in my Ferengi ears this morning.
So which version of Star Trek do you prefer? The old school with Kirk, with Janeway? I mean, which one with Picard?
My favorite is still the original series. I was a kid when it came out, and yeah, by modern standards, it's kind of laughable, especially when Kirk goes into must keep control. And just watching that episode last night, where a guy, somebody falls down, Bones kneels down, and we immediately lip sync. He's dead, Jim.
Oh my goodness!
I used to do Star Trek conventions. I actually wrote a Star Trek novel.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I grew up on Star Trek. I mean,
yeah, we all did.
My dad got me hooked with Kirk. Well, back even with Pike, with Captain Pike. So
that was a great episode.
We go old school, yeah. And yeah, they're saying Voyager is mine. I'm trying to read the chat room at the same time as talk, and it's too early in the morning for that. But
well, let me throw in. I did a Next Generation novel called The Forgotten War. I think it's book number 48 or 56, and sometime we'll talk about what a nightmare it was to write it, but what an interesting challenge as well. The book is called The Forgotten War.
Oh, we'll be all over that.
Yeah.
They're talking about Klingon chicks right now. I actually had...
Oh, I had one hit on me in an elevator once. Scared the hell out of me.
I'm sure. Well, I had 2 dogs. Oh, this has been years ago that I named. They were sisters, and it's like, I need, sister names for these dogs, and ended up naming them B'Etor and Lursa. And everybody's like, who? And it's like, if you're not a Trekkie, you're not going to get it. But,
that's right.
Yeah, definitely. So
that was a good episode as well, where Riker winds up as an exchange officer, and the Klingon woman starts hitting on him and is gritting him. It was just like, uh-oh.
That would be for an interesting time for sure.
Yeah.
So you're joining us here later tonight to play some Conflicted.
I'm not familiar with the game.
Well, you should be getting it in the mail possibly today. I'll check because I know it was sent out to you. You might get the decks today, but it's just a series of cards with scenarios on them. Mm-hmm. And one of the decks you're going to get is based off of a post-apocalyptic book written by G. Michael Hoft. Mm-hmm. And because the owner of the card game can actually he's doing my book right now, which is, I'm so excited. He's going to break it down into a deck of cards and put scenarios out there. But we throw out scenarios, and what would you do? So I'll ask you a question to warm up. Let's say there was a downgrade situation, and Washington, D.C. goes bye-bye. And now you're responsible for rebuilding the country. And you could put the capital of the United States in anywhere that you wanted to. Where do you think would be the best location?
Black Mountain, North Carolina, because that's my next book.
When is your next book coming out then?
I got the letter of approval from the editor yesterday, and actually there's going to be 2 sequels to One Second After. They'll be published back to back next October and next December or January. So it's about a year out. But that's the way publishing works.
Yeah, sadly that it does. But looking forward to it, that's for sure. So the question that I asked earlier, so what keeps you awake at night?
What keeps me awake at night that I can discuss with my fiance in the next room?
No, let's not go that route. Banana.
We're not going there. We got kids listening.
Yeah, well, we do cuss occasionally, but we save that for later tonight. That's for later tonight. But we talked about Ebola, ISIS, and all of that. What worries you the most?
What keeps me awake is when I was in graduate school, my circadian clock got rewired that I tend to work nights and then sleep during the afternoons. Therefore, while I'm working, I monitor the news and check email and such. And what keeps me awake at night is simply I'm watching the news, particularly in these last 3 months, and it's like, oh my God, this is worse than fiction. This is really happening. And at this moment, it's, as you and I said earlier, it's the perfect storm. It's terrorism, it's disease, it's financial collapse. Now all we need to do is throw in an EMP scenario. We're in for a very rough year ahead. A
Yeah.
very rough year. I think it was the greatest challenge to the Republic since the Civil War.
Yeah, people are to the point now, I've noticed, where they're just kind of like standing in the middle of the room, just twirling in circles because they don't know which way to go, because it's
Yes.
hitting from all sides.
Yes.
We're down to the last couple minutes, and I never nail the ending of this show correctly. So usually somebody gets cut off mid-sentence. So I'll apologize for that now. But to get your books, to track you down, how would one?
Well, where to get the books? Well, any of the internet distribution systems. The book Day of Wrath is now out in paper, though we actually completely ran through the first print run. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it BNN, iTunes, or any of your finer book or internet distribution sites. And you can get almost all my books that way. I just asked that folks, if they happen to buy it on Amazon, love the books or hate them, if they would just do a review. I really appreciate it when they do.
All right, excuse me.
You okay over there?
I am.
Overcome with emotion?
I am. Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. It's too early in the morning, I guess. But greatly appreciate you being on the show this morning.
Are you okay?
I am. I will be. But thank you so much. You've been a plethora of information. And look forward to the second book coming out and for playing with you later today.
Looking forward to it.
Once I get my voice back.
Right?
Thank you.
Okay. God bless and have a good day.
You too.
Bye now.